Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about the verse 36 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. This is in continuation of the previous two verses. It is about, which are all about learning. Just as a reminder, what Bhagavan said in verse 34 is for people of little knowledge, others beginning with wife and children are just one family. In the heart of those who have much learning, not one, many book families exist as obstacles to yoga. That's so in other words, he's saying that if we have a vast amount of learning, all our learning is like many families in our mind. And he goes on in the next verse to say, those who do not intend to erase the writing here refers to the writing of destiny. In other words, for those who do not want to wipe out their destiny, destiny can be wiped out only by wiping out ego. So the implication is for those who don't want to get rid of ego, investigating where they were born, who have known the writing. Here writing refers to all the books. Knowing the writing is for what? What's the purpose of all this learning if we have no intention to erase destiny along with its root, ego? That is the implication. And then he addresses Arunachala, saying, Sonagiri the wise, they have acquired the nature of a sound recording machine. Who else? That is, if we simply accumulate a vast amount of knowledge, we are no better than a sound recording machine. In those days, it would have been a gramophone. Nowadays, there are so many technologies for recording sound. But we are no better than that if we simply accumulate learning without any intention to erase ego. That is the implication. So in continuation of that, this verse 36, what Bhagavan says here is, Katram adangaril kaladare winda patrum matapayin pal winda sutru palachinte vai noi winda seetedi odal winda windadu ondrandru indru una. What that means is, rather than those who have not subsided, though learned, those who are not learned are saved. They are saved from the grasping demon of pride. They are saved from the disease of many whirling thoughts. They are saved from running seeking fame. Know that what they are saved from is not one, implying they're not saved from just one evil, they're saved from so many evils. So the most important word, in my view, in this verse is the second word. That is, the first word is katram, which means though learned. The second word is adangaril, that is those who have not subsided, those who have not subsided here means their ego has not subsided. So though they're learned, if they haven't subsided, better than them is, rather than them, it is the unlearned who are saved. This, why I consider this word adankaril to be so important, that is, Bhagavan's teachings are all about subsiding. Bhagavan has made it clear that the root of all evil is our rising as ego, because it's only when we rise as ego that we project all this multiplicity and all these pairs of opposites, good and good and bad, virtuous and evil, all these things, all these differences come into existence only when we rise as ego. And as ego, we have so many Vishaya vasanas, which prompt us to act in us, particularly when the mind is impure, when the vasanas are very strong and very dense. That is what prompts us to act in an unrighteous manner. So all evil behavior arises because of the strength of ego and its vasanas. So since the rising of ego is the root of all evil, the subsidence of ego is the source of all good virtues. That is why in the last paragraph of Nana, the 20th paragraph of Nana, he says, Tan erindal sakalamum erum. If oneself arises, everything rises. Tan adanginal sakalum adangum. Here he's using the same word, adangu, is used here, but he uses there. If that means if oneself subsides or if oneself ceases, everything ceases. And then in the second sentence he says, Evlo kevlo tandu nadikaromo, avlo kavlo namayundu. The word tandu is not a very easy word to translate into English. There's no exact equivalent. What tandu means is sinking low. It implies subsiding and being humble. So what he says in this sentence is, to whatever extent sinking low we behave or conduct ourselves, to that extent there is goodness. So what in effect Bhagavan is saying here, there is goodness to the extent to which we subside. So Bhagavan's path is a path of subsidence. So what is the purpose of learning? That is the only benefit we can gain from learning, is if we use our learning to learn how to subside. And the means to subside, Bhagavan makes very clear in Nana. For example, in the 6th paragraph of Nana, again he uses the same verb adangam. He says, Nana endam vicharane inaleye manam adangam. That is, the mind will subside or cease only by the investigation, who am I? And to make it clear, to emphasize that only, he uses a double stress there. That is, vicharane inal means by vicharana, by vichara, by investigation. Vicharane inale, that A is an emphasis to make it clear that it's only by vichara. But he uses a double emphasis. He says, vicharane inale ye. So that makes it's a double stress on, it's only by means of the investigation, who am I, that the mind will subside. And likewise in the 8th paragraph, he says, Manam adangu vidaku vicharane tavira veru tahunta upayangal illai. What that means is, for the mind to subside or cease, except vicharana, except self-investigation, there are no other adequate means. And then he goes on to say, if made to subside by other means, the mind remaining as if it had subsided will rise again. In other words, any other means we use to make the mind subside and cease will only be temporary. The mind will cease as it ceases every night in sleep, but it will rise again. So other means of subsidence can bring about only manolaya, temporary dissolution of mind. But to bring about the permanent dissolution of mind, self-investigation is the only way. So when he says in this verse 36 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham, Katram adangario, rather than those who have not subsided, though learned, those who are not learned are saved. So the important thing is, that is, learning in itself is not wrong. But that learning should be a means to an end. Learning is not an end in itself. So if we study in order to learn how to subside, then that learning is good. So if we study Bhagavan's teachings with the intention to follow his teachings, and if we use what we've understood, if we apply what we've understood in practice by turning our attention within, then that learning is good, is not harmful. But if we merely study, go on studying and studying and studying, learning more and more books, comparing this philosophy with that philosophy, this religion with that religion, all these, this is of no use if it doesn't teach us how to subside. So the benefit of learning is only learning how to subside. And not only learning how to subside, learning why we should subside, motivating us to turn our attention within and thereby subside back into a source from which we rose. If we have no such intention to subside, if we merely learn, then, well, as he says here, the unlearned are saved. And he goes, whatever thing that they are saved from, he gives some example. They are saved from a grasping demon of pride. That is, if we've learned a lot, that can lead to pride. Oh, I'm so learned, I've studied so much, I know so much more than other people. That pride can be there. And he describes pride as patram mada pay. That pay means demon, mada means pride, and patram, grasping. That is the nature of that pride. Once we've fallen a prey to that pride, it grasps us like a demon. In the next verse also, he talks about this. He talks about becoming a prey to the vile courtesan of Puhalchi, which that means Puhalchi is not just fame, but having a high reputation, high standing in society. So if we are very learned, people hold us in high regard. That is what Bhagavan calls that. If you have a desire for that, he calls it the vile courtesan of flattery. So here he talks about the grasping demon of pride. It possesses us like a demon, that pride, if we fall a prey to it. And then he says, Sutram palachinte vai noi winda. They are saved from the disease of many whirling thoughts. That is, for Bhagavan, thinking, that is a disease. If we are caught by that disease of many whirling thoughts, it's very difficult to be saved from it. So he said they're saved from the disease of many whirling thoughts. And then he says, Sir Tedi Odal Wienda, they're saved from running, seeking fame. That is, if we are very learned, then we want people to appreciate our learning. So we go here and there to show off our learning in order to gain fame and high reputation. So if we subside, we won't do these things. But if we don't subside, mere learning without subsidence will lead to running in search of fame. So better than those who are learned but haven't subsided, those who are unlearned are saved. And then he ends by saying, Uڵḷadu, that from which they're saved, or what they're saved from, on Drandru, it is not one. Endruana, know that it is not one. Not one implies they're not saved from just one evil, they're saved from many evils. So the important thing is, if we study, if we learn anything, we should learn for just one purpose and one purpose alone. That is to learn how to subside and to motivate ourselves to subside. That is, if we understand Bhagavan's teachings, we'll not only learn how we can subside, but we'll also learn why we should subside, the benefit of subsiding. But we cannot get any happiness from any of the things of this world. So true happiness lies only within us. So to experience that happiness that is our real nature, we need to subside. So that love for subsidence will grow in our heart if we study Bhagavan's teachings with the right motive, with the intention to subside.
So, Michael, the vast majority, actually, they have been through some other path, right, before coming to Bhagavan. I think most of you here are too. But what I've seen is like people struggle to let go what they have learned, and they are continuing to sort of compare.
Yeah.
That's a problem. I mean, yeah, I myself, been to checked out other paths and teachings and so forth, before coming to Bhagavan. By Bhagavan's grace, it was natural. I mean, I didn't have any problems. There's a lot of love and respect for what I've learned from others. But I just moved on. It was an easy transition. But having run the satsangs for like close to 15 years now, and I could see a lot of people struggling with it. They're unable to let go. And some people actually, after some time, they just quit because they just couldn't handle the focus that we are on here. So, and then there are some who continue to compare. Okay, Kashmir Saivism says this, that says that, or does it compare, so forth. How do people let go and then just focus more and more on Bhagavan's teachings?
If we really understand Bhagavan's teachings, we will see how this is so much deeper than any other type of philosophy, any other type of path. This is the ultimate spiritual path, the ultimate philosophy. It's the simplest philosophy of all, and the most radical. And likewise, I mean, both the philosophy and the practice are inseparable in Bhagavan's teachings. So the practice is also, this is the deepest of all practice. If we really understand Bhagavan's teachings, we will understand they are beyond compare. They cannot be compared to any other thing. That is true. A lot of what Bhagavan taught, it's also been taught in the Upanishads, in the Bhagavad Gita, and in so many other texts. But Bhagavan has presented it in a very pure and refined manner. So Bhagavan has given us the very essence of the whole of Vedanta. So if we really appreciate Bhagavan, we won't feel any need to compare with others. And in this connection, before I say that, but in order to understand Bhagavan properly, we need to be ready to set aside all our previous learning and all our previous ideas, beliefs, and our whole view needs to change. Bhagavan's teachings should make us radically question all that we've previously learned. If we really understand Bhagavan properly, in this connection, Sadhu Om used to say, people sometimes used to criticize Sadhu Om because he would often point out misunderstandings that people have. And people said, why don't you just talk about the positive things about Bhagavan's teachings? Why do you have to talk about the misunderstandings? And in that connection, what he said is, if you bring me a well-scribbled slate, a slate with many, many scribblings on, and you ask me to write the beautiful name Ramana, the first thing I have to do is I have to wipe the slate clean. And then only when I write the beautiful name Ramana, its beauty will be seen. But if instead of wiping the slate clean, if over all the already existing scribblings, if I write Ramana, it will just become, it will just add to all the scribblings. It'll be lost among all the scribblings. Likewise with the mind. First, we need to make our mind like a clean slate. We need to come to Bhagavan's teachings with a mind that is a clean slate. What I think in medieval European philosophy, they called a tabula rasa, a clean tablet. We need to come with a clean tablet. Then only Bhagavan's teachings will make a real impression on us. If we have so many other thoughts about other things we've learned, we won't be able to see the freshness and the depth of Bhagavan's teachings. So it's necessary for us first to set aside all that we've learned before, approach Bhagavan teaching with a fresh mind, and then only we'll be able to understand the real depth of his teachings. And once we've understood that, we will see that there's nothing else that can be compared with Bhagavan's teaching. Then there's no need to compare. Bhagavan has given us all that we need.
Michael, thank you for your interpretation. My name is Noel. I lived in India and I learned about karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. If I'm not mistaken, Ramakrishna achieved moksha using all three of those yogas, maybe others. But what I'm hearing you say today is that really Ramana Maharshi is deprecating the jnana yoga path, the path of learning and studying and coming to subsidence, I guess, or moksha, or awakening by perhaps studying the scriptures and dwelling on the path. Would you comment on that? Thank you.
Okay. First, we need to understand what is jnana yoga or jnana marga, what is the path of knowledge. Merely learning the scriptures is not the path of knowledge. And in that, Ramakrishna concurs 100% with Bhagavan. Ramakrishna said, the Panchangam means the astrological almanac, the Panchangam may tell you when it is going to rain. But however much you squeeze the pages of the Panchangam, you will not get a drop of water. That's his very homely way of saying you cannot get jnana merely from reading scriptures. The purpose of the jnana sastras is to show us the way. And the way is, because there's a huge misunderstanding among many people, but jnana means conceptual knowledge, understanding. If we read all the scriptures, we get a certain understanding, but that understanding is not jnana. What is jnana? Jnana is our real nature. Jnana means pure awareness. In the Upanishads, it's described that is the definition of Brahman given in the Upanishads is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. Satyam means what is real. In other words, it implies being, Sat. Jnanam means awareness. And Anantam means infinite. So infinite being awareness, that is Brahman. So, and Brahman itself is jnana. So the jnana, we cannot get that jnana. We can get, that word jnana means knowledge or awareness. So even our knowledge of the world, it's a type of jnana. Science, it's often called vijnana. It's the jnana about all these phenomena. But the jnana that is taught, but the jnana marga is to gain the real knowledge, which is nothing but pure awareness. And pure awareness cannot be an object of awareness. So we can know pure awareness only by being pure awareness. Prajnanam Brahman. Awareness is Brahman. But we cannot know, awareness can never be an object. So we can know awareness only by being awareness. So only by being pure awareness can we know ourselves as we actually are. Can we know pure awareness? Even now we are pure awareness. Pure awareness is our real nature. But because we have risen as ego, we have conflated that awareness with a set of adjuncts, a set of upadhis, namely this body consisting of 5 sheaths. So we're aware of ourselves as I am Noel, I am Michael, I am whoever. That conflated awareness is what is called Chit Jada Granti. Chit means for pure awareness, and jnana. Jada means what is not aware. That's all this body, all the 5 sheaths. They have no awareness. So the person we take ourselves to be, Noel has no awareness. Michael has no awareness. Why Noel seems to have awareness, why Michael seems to have awareness, is because ego has risen and identified itself as I am Noel. Because ego is aware, when it is aware of itself as I am Noel, Noel seems to be aware. That's why all the people in this world seem to be aware. But because of ego, but they actually, this person we take ourselves to be is as jada as a rock or any material object. This is just a material object. The mind is also an object, something known by us. Mind in the sense, well, when we talk about mind, we need to distinguish ego from the rest of the mind. That is, ego is the knowing element of the mind. All the other thoughts are objects known by us. So, because we've risen as ego, we are now experiencing pure awareness as if it's this little person we take ourselves to be. So, in order to know ourselves as the pure awareness that we actually are, we need to cease rising as ego. So in verse 27 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, Bhagavan says, Nānu diyada ullanile, namaduvai ullanile. That means the state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are that. That means we are Brahman. Of course, we are always Brahman, but we don't know ourselves as Brahman because we've risen as ego. So it's only when we cease rising as ego, but we will know ourselves as Brahman. That is what Bhagavan, that's why I said the most important word in this verse is the second word, those who have not subsided. So it's the subsidence of ego, that is the key to jnana. So that is what we should learn from all these scriptures, is that in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to cease rising as ego. And in the same verse, verse 27, Bhagavan goes on to say, without investigating the place where I rises, how to attain the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. The annihilation of oneself means the annihilation of ego. Only when ego is annihilated are we really in that state where I is without rising. So when he says, without investigating the place where I rises, he uses the word place there in a metaphorical sense. Place there means the source. What is the source from which ego rises? It's from our being. Our being is I am. Ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am null. So where did this adjunct conflated awareness, I am null, rise from? It arises from the basic awareness, the fundamental awareness, I am. So investigating your being, which is that fundamental awareness I am, that is the means to bring about the annihilation of ego. And Bhagavan says, without investigating that, without investigating our being, how to attain the annihilation of ourself? So this is the true jnana marga. Merely studying all the scriptures is squeezing the pages of the Panchangam. You're not going to get a drop of jnana that way. That is the scriptures, even Bhagavan's works are useless if we don't apply them in practice. The benefit of Bhagavan's works is that they clearly show us that we cannot attain jnana except by investigating ourselves. Because we ourselves are jnana. In verse 13 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, he says, Jnanamam tane me, oneself who is jnana alone is real. So we ourselves are that jnana. So jnana means knowing ourselves. And we cannot know ourselves without being ourselves. Being as we actually are, that alone is the path of jnana. Regarding the path of bhakti, people often think bhakti and jnana are two different paths. Either you go on the path of bhakti or you go on the path of jnana. That's a complete misunderstanding. Bhagavan has made it clear, but Bhagavan often said bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti is absolutely essential. If we understand it correctly, the path of jnana is the pinnacle of the path of devotion. That is, all the other practices of bhakti lead up to and culminate in this path. Why is that? Because what is the ultimate aim in bhakti? It is to give ourselves wholly to God, to surrender ourselves. That is, if you truly love someone, you don't think about what you can get from that person. You think about what you can do for that person. So love is about giving. And the greatest love is to give ourselves wholly to the one we love. So if we truly love God, our aim should be to give ourselves wholly to God. Ourself in this context means ego. So how to give this ego wholly to God? The nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to other things. So ego will subside in such a manner that it will not rise again, only by attending to itself. So the path of surrender can be brought to its culmination only by means of Atma-vichara. So Atma-vichara is the pinnacle of the path of devotion. So this is not in any way opposed to the path of devotion. All the other practices of devotion, they're all good, but they're not an end in themselves.
I understand that the Bhagavad Gita to be the path of karma yoga.
That's also mentioned there. I mean, Krishna obviously talks a lot about that because of the context in which it's given. But it's not only the path of karma. What does he start? He starts his teachings from verse 11 of chapter 2. And the first thing he's emphasizing, that we are not this body. The first, from 11 up to, I don't know, about 25 or so, he's just dinning in that point, but we are not this body. So he starts by distinguishing what we actually are from what we seem to be. So this is he starts with the teaching of jnana. Because Arjuna wasn't fully grasping it, he had to teach so many other things also. But he kept on coming back to it. In chapter 13, he begins by saying that it's necessary to distinguish the knower of the field from the field. This body is the field. The one who resides in that body, that is the knower of the field. And then in the next verse he says, I too am the knower of the field. Why? Because he's the reality of ego. Ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am known. The reality of ego is the pure awareness I am. That is Atma. But Krishna says it when he says Aham Atma Gudakesha in verse 20 of chapter 10, I am Atma. He's identifying himself with that I am in each and every being. I am Atma in every living being. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all living beings. And he's clearly teaching this in chapter 6, in verse 19 of chapter 6, he says, fix your mind only on self. Atmanyeva. Atmani means in yourself or on yourself. Eva means only, so fix your mind only on yourself. In verse 26 of chapter 25 of chapter 6, the last line is Atma samstam manakritva na kinchitapi chintayat. Fix your mind on Atma, on yourself. Do not think of anything else. So he's repeatedly emphasizing this path of jnana. But he also teaches, the thing is, Vedanta, there's something very beautiful about Vedanta, but I don't know how many people really appreciate this. Vedanta is like a mother. A mother will give different, if a mother has a newborn child, she won't give it to the same food, but she gives her grown-up child. So like that, Vedanta has something for everyone. That's why there are so many different interpretations of Vedanta. On the Gita, there are so many different interpretations because different people see the same thing in different ways, according to their level of maturity. So which is the correct interpretation of the Gita, of the Upanishads? Is it Advaita? Is it Vishishta Dvaita? Is it Dvaita? Is it Achintya Bheda? Or is it Suddha Dvaita? Or is it Bheda? Is it Dvaita, Advaita? So many interpretations. All are correct from the perspective of the one who has that, because the same thing is seen differently by different people. So it's not that one interpretation is correct and other interpretations are wrong. Some interpretations are deeper, some are more superficial. And the deepest of all interpretations, from the perspective of Bhagavan's teachings, is Advaita.
Thank you, Michael. You're very wise. I'll meditate.
I'm not wise. I just happen to, by Bhagavan's grace, my mind happens to have been soaked in his teachings for nearly 50 years now, but it's all only by his grace. There's nothing wise about me at all. I am most unfit, unworthy recipient of his grace, but it's just his grace only.
Yeah. Poitavaren.
Poitavango.
Thank you, Michael. In that context, the verse 10 of Upadesundiyar came to my mind.
Yes.
Udita
And there the important word is Udita iditil odungi. That is, it's only when we subside, only having subsided, can we really be in the place from which we rose. And
I mean,
that
when you
is
say subside, what do you mean? Who subsides? Is it the mind you're talking about?
ego. If ego subsides, everything subsides. I read the last paragraph of Nana. Bhagavan says, if oneself rises, everything rises. If oneself subsides, everything subsides. When he talks about oneself rising, what rises is not what we actually are never rises. Satchit Uڵḷadu, he says in verse 24 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. Satchit does not rise. What rises is ego. So when we rise as ego, everything rises. When we as ego subside, everything subsides. So it's the subsidence of ego.
Right. So back to verse 10, do you want to give the translation of verse 10?
Oh yes. Udita idatal odungi iratal adu karmam bhaktium undi para adu yogam jnanam undi para. That is, being, having subsided in the place from which one rose, that is karma and bhakti, that is yoga and jnana.
That answers your question.
Many
The
thanks.
place from which we rose is our being. I am.
Good. Thank you, Michael. So let me go to the yeah, this question is from Radhika. When does self-attention become easy or effortless?
It is our real nature. So to become easy and effortless only when ego is removed. So long as we continue to rise as ego, we will struggle to hold on to self-attentiveness, because the very nature of ego is to grasp form, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. That is, without grasping form, ego cannot come into existence, it cannot stand, it cannot flourish. That's why he says, Urupatri undam, grasping form, it comes into being. That is, as soon as we rise as ego, we project a body and grasp it as I. Urupatri nikam, grasping form, it stands. That is, as soon as we rise as ego, we project the form of a body, which we grasp as I, and we continue holding on to that body as I, so long as we remain as ego. Only when we subside in sleep do we let go of the body, but when we rise again, we project the body and grasp as I. Grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Urupatri undu mika ongam. That is, having grasped the form of a body as I, we don't stop with that. Through the five senses of this body, we project this world, and our mind is constantly dwelling on this world. That is the attention we give to. When he talks about form, he means any vishaya, any phenomenon of any kind whatsoever is a vishaya. So whether the physical forms of the world or the mental forms, the thoughts, the feelings, the perceptions, the memories, and so on, the mind is constantly holding on to forms. Without holding on to forms, we cannot survive as ego. So ego depends on constantly grasping form. So in the next sentence, he says, Uruvittu urupatram. Leaving form, it grasps form. But because it cannot remain for a moment without, if it lets go of all forms, as it does every night, that is when we fall asleep, we're too tired to continue projecting and holding on to these forms. So we finally let go of everything and we subside into sleep. But in sleep, we remain in our source, which is that Satchit, and from there we get recharged, so to speak. Our batteries are recharged, and we jump up the next morning full of enthusiasm to go about grasping form for the next 16 hours or so, until we become too tired and we subside. So throughout the waking and dream states, the mind is constantly grasping form. But Bhagavan gave the important sentence in this verse, is most important. He says, Tedinal otam pidicum. That literally means if seeking, it takes flight. If what is to seek what? That implies if ego seeks its own reality, if it seeks to know who am I, in other words, if it investigates itself, otam pidicum. Otam means running, pidicum means it grasps running. In other words, it takes flight, it runs away. That is, and then he ends the verse, Uruvatra Peyahande. But that is, its ego is a formless phantom. It's got no form of its own. So it cannot have it seems to have a separate existence only because it grasps form. If instead of grasping form, if it tries to grasp itself, it will subside and dissolve back into its source. Why? Because it itself has no form, and it cannot stand without grasping form. So if it grasps itself, it will subside and merge back into its source. So the ego cannot subside by any means other than, it cannot subside permanently by any means other than a self-investigation. If it subsides by any other means, as he says in paragraph 8, it will remain as if subsided, but it will rise again. Every night when we fall asleep, we subside by what means? By being too tired to continue thinking, so we subside. If we have a serious accident and have sustained head injuries, we'll be in a coma. That's another type of subsidence. If something happens and we swoon, that's another type of coma. If we are given general anesthesia, we go into another type of subsidence. Or if we practice pranayama or other yoga methods, we can go into nirvikalpa samadhi. But all of these, whether sleep or coma or swoon or general anesthesia or nirvikalpa samadhi, they are all states of manolaya. They're temporary dissolution of mind. And when the mind subsides in laya, it will rise again. So, Bhagavan made it clear, even nirvikalpa samadhi is not a useful aim, because in nirvikalpa samadhi we will remain subsided. It's very pleasant so long as we remain subsided, just like it's very pleasant sleeping. But Bhagavan used to tell the story of a yogi on the banks of a Ganga who went into nirvikalpa samadhi for 300 years. And because he was in nirvikalpa samadhi, his body remained as it was, but everyone else passed away and so many generations passed away. Before he went into nirvikalpa samadhi, he had asked his disciple to bring him water. And then he went into nirvikalpa samadhi for 300 years. When he woke up, the first thing he did was he angrily asked, "Where's my water?" So Bhagavan said, the last thought that was in his mind before he went into samadhi was the first thought that arose when he woke up from samadhi. That means in spite of being 300 years in nirvikalpa samadhi, even the most superficial thought was not eradicated. What to say of all the vasanas? So nirvikalpa samadhi is not a means to eradicate the vasanas. The vasanas can be eradicated only in the waking and dream states. And we eradicate vasanas by not allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. So the most effective way to eradicate all Vishaya vasanas is to hold on to self-attentiveness and thereby not be swayed by any Vishaya vasana.
And with practice and practice, it gets easier.
Yeah. Oh yes. So when will it will continue? Bhagavan says, if we practice in this manner, the strength of the strength to remain in the birthplace of the mind, that's to remain abiding in the source, that will increase to the extent to which we practice. But it never becomes effortless. Effort is required up till the very end, until ego is eradicated. That is, the sentence I was referring to there was in the 6th paragraph of Nana, after describing that as and when any thought appears, that means as and when anything appears, because everything is just thought, rather than following the thought, it's necessary to investigate to whom it has occurred. Investigating to whom it has occurred means turning our attention away from whatever has appeared back towards ourselves, the one to whom it has appeared. And if we hold on to that self-attentiveness, the mind will then return to its birthplace, its source, in other words. And he said, and the thought that has arisen will also subside. And then he says, Ipadi paraka paraka manatiku tampirapiditil tangi nikam shakti adikadi kindradu. By practicing and practicing in this manner, for the mind, the strength to remain in its birthplace and its source will increase. So by practice, we gain more and more strength to hold on to the practice. But the effort is required till the very end. Because if we don't make effort to hold on to self-attentiveness, our mind will naturally go after Vishayas, because grasping form is its very nature. So, only when ego is annihilated, then we will find that the self-attentiveness we've been trying to hold on to is our very nature. That is, we are pure awareness, and as pure awareness, we know nothing other than pure awareness. So no effort is needed once ego is annihilated. But so long as ego remains, effort is necessary.
And that part about easy, I mean, it seems difficult because we just don't want to let go of our attachment to the vasanas.
As Bhagavan says, it's extremely easy. Ayayati salapam. It's extremely easy. But to us, it seems difficult because we are not willing to let go of other things. So it's our lack of love that makes it seem difficult. But by practicing more and more, we gain more and more love just to be as we are.
And also, coming back to Radhika's question, you address the point about the seeming difficulty, right? And then we practice and practice, the ability of the mind to subside in its source increases and increases. And then at some point when we practice, the swatma bhakti, our love to attend to ourself increases, right? And when that happens, it gets a bit more natural for us to.
It's not at some point. Every effort we make to be self-attentive strengthens the sattvasana, the inclination to be self-attentive. That sattvasana is what is otherwise called swatma bhakti.
Yeah.
So it's that's why Bhagavan said, no effort made in this path will ever go in vain. That is, every step we make in this path is we're moving one step closer to our goal. So the more we practice being self-attentive, the more we will gain the love to be self-attentive. That love is the Shakti that Bhagavan refers to when he said the mind will gain the power to remain in its source. That power, that Shakti, is the power of love.
Thank you, Michael. Let's going back to the verse. There was a question, and the questioner would like to remain anonymous. So don't you think anyone, whether learned or unlearned, equally fall trapped by ego? As I've seen unlearned also full of ego, either for their beauty or wealth. So only substance of ego, whether learned or unlearned, is required, right?
Yes, of course. That's the important point is subsiding. Some unlearned people are very simple, very humble. So the implication there when Bhagavan said, rather than those who though learned have not subsided, the unlearned are saved. The implication is, though it's not explicit there, those who are humble, though unlearned, they are saved. That is the key to salvation is subsidence. In fact, subsidence itself is salvation. There is no salvation other than subsiding more and more and more until we dissolve forever back into the source from which we've risen. That is giving ourselves wholly to God.
Right. Thank you, Michael. So on the aspect of effortless, so there are some teachers, they who follow Bhagavan's teachings, but they have come out and said, you don't need to put effort, call off the search, that kind of stuff, right?
They are not following Bhagavan's teaching. They are using Bhagavan's name, claiming to be following his teaching. If they are not making effort, and if they're not telling others to make effort, they are not following Bhagavan's path. I mean, if they're telling others, we don't have to tell others to make effort, but we shouldn't tell others that effort is not necessary. If we say effort is not necessary, if we say call off for search or any such thing, that clearly shows we are not following Bhagavan's path.
Yeah,
because if we, it's a particular teacher who's famous for saying call off for search. That is impractical advice. Because if we don't search for happiness within ourselves, we'll be searching for it outside. So it's impossible. So long as we rise as a jiva, as ego, we are separated from the infinite happiness that we actually are. So we are all seeking happiness. It's our very nature to seek happiness. So where do we seek happiness? That's the important thing. If we are not searching for happiness within ourselves, we'll be searching for it outside. So that clearly saying call off the search. Firstly, it shows not understood Bhagavan teachings at all, but not understood the nature of ego at all, the nature of mind. But mind is always searching for happiness.
in
From
the wrong
greatest
things.
saint to the worst of sinners, all are seeking happiness. It's a matter of where we seek happiness. Do we seek happiness outside, or do we seek happiness within ourselves?
So effort is necessary.
Absolutely necessary.
And that's why Bhagavan used the word 2 times in that sentence. Palaga,
Paraka,
palaga.
paraka. By practicing and practicing, yes. He put so much emphasis on it.
Yeah. He's Murugan here is bringing out the first sentence of Gnanyar. Because all jivas inherently want to be happy. That's how he's starting it, right? Sagala jeevarulum dukkamendri sugama irukka virumbuvodalum. That's how he's starting.
And that first paragraph of Nana, that was not part of the question of Bhagavan's answers to Shiva Prakasham Pillai. When Bhagavan rewrote the question and answers in the form of an essay, he added that first paragraph. So that is such an important paragraph.
Exactly. So now let's go to the next question. Rabi, do you want to ask your question? If you still think it has not been answered.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I often have trouble with the word jnana. In a way, we have come to use it in ordinary speech. So it's associated with learning, knowledge about things. So when we say, like in tradition of Brahman, all is one, and also try to reimagine jnana as the being or the Brahman, we learn into some difficulty because of our prior learning or association. So when Bhagavan says we are jnana itself, how are we to transcend that our prior conditioning, or how to rethink the word jnana in service of our
Okay.
practice.
The word jnana simply means knowledge, or knowing. That is the simple meaning of jnana. So it can include knowing the world, it can include knowing the scriptures, it can include knowing anything. But the deepest sense of the word jnana is, what is it that is knowing? It is that awareness that is knowing. So the pure awareness is jnana in its deepest sense. So when it is said in the Upanishads, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, the Brahman itself is the Brahma, that being, awareness, and infinity, that is Brahman. There jnana is being used in its deepest sense. Likewise in the Mahavakya, Prajnanam Brahma. Prajnana there it implies pure awareness. It simply means awareness or knowledge, but what is implied by it is pure awareness. So pure awareness is the deepest form of knowledge. It's the base of all knowledge, because without pure awareness as the base, the awareness that is called ego couldn't rise and know other things. So everything is ultimately based on that pure awareness, which is our real nature. So we need to, that is, when we come across words, we need to understand the sense in which the word is being used from the context. So, for example, the Triputi is the
knower and the known are all the same.
Yes. There's two ways that is explained. Sometimes the words that are used are pramata, the knower, prameya, what is known or what can be known, and pramana, the means of knowing it. It also sometimes described as jnata, the knower, jnaya, what is known or what can be known, and jnana, the knowing of it. So there jnana is talking about knowing in an ordinary sense, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, knowing through testimony. So the word jnana is used in many different senses according to the context. So we need to understand from the context.
Thank you, Michael. It's been really good to be reinforced with those examples. Thank you.
That's one of the reasons why Michael's preferred way of translating the word jnana is pure awareness. Just to be very clear, as clear as possible.
Yeah,
right,
well, not in all contexts, I wouldn't translate it.
Most of the time,
when it's used in the sense of pure awareness, I translate it as pure awareness.
Right. So, next question would like to, I think Sanjay Lohia, go ahead.
So, sir, we were discussing verse 249 of Guru Vachaka Kovai today, which says, the jiva dwells in the heart, which is beyond mental conception, and his vasanas also dwell there. If instead the vasanas dwelt above in the brain, would they not be destroyed when the head is cut off? So this is an interesting verse, sir. We couldn't understand the full implications of it. Could you please explain it?
Okay. There are, it would have been in some particular context. I think the context was, that is when Bhagavan talks about the heart, he's referring to that in the deepest sense, heart refers to ourselves as we actually are. But there were some among the devotees of Bhagavan who didn't have such a deep and subtle understanding. So they were always asking Bhagavan, where in the body is the heart located? Is it the same as the Anahata chakra, the heart chakra? Bhagavan said no. Then is it in the Sahasrara, the heart? Bhagavan said no. And because they're asking questions about the body, Bhagavan talks with reference to the body. And he said, with reference to the body, the heart can be said to be 2 digits to the right from the center of the chest. That is not the absolute truth about the heart. That is only with reference to the body. So, ego is spread throughout the body. Ego identifies the whole body as I. But where ego is centered in the body, so to speak, is 2 digits to right from the center of the chest. And Bhagavan used to point this out. It gives simple examples to point it out. If you ask some school children, who knows the answer to this sum, some mathematical problem, who knows the answer? Those who know the answer, they won't go point to their head and say, I know the answer. They'll point to the chest and say, I know the answer. If you say to them, who will run and collect the post from the post office or collect the newspapers or whatever, they won't point to their feet and say, I will run. They'll say, I will run, sir, I will run. So we all refer to ourselves naturally we refer to ourselves by pointing to the chest. That is because though we experience the whole body as I, that is where we experience at the center of ourselves. So but that's only with reference to the body. So truly speaking, the 2 digits of right from the center of the chest is the heart in the center. It's where ego is centered in this body. Though ego is pervaded throughout the body, it's centered here. But and Bhagavan also said the vasanas reside in the heart. So these people who are still thinking only in terms of the body, they argued, no, the vasana must reside in the Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus in the head, because that's where there's so much that it's in the brain, but all the thinking, mental activity goes on. So that must be where the vasanas are. So in answer to such people, Bhagavan said, no, the vasanas remain along with ego. The center of ego is in the center of the 2 digits right from the center of the chest. Therefore, when a person's head is cut off, the vasanas are not destroyed. If the vasanas were all in the head and ego's down here, if you cut off the head, you separate ego from its vasanas. But this is a very, very gross way of talking about it. But Bhagavan is talking with them at their level because they're thinking only in terms of the body. The truth is, when death comes and we leave the body, what ego takes with it are its vasanas. It is often said that that when the gross body dies, the subtle body is what goes on to another body. But Bhagavan has clarified that the word subtle body is used in different sense in different contexts. Sometimes it is classified, the 5 sheaths are classified into 3 bodies. So the physical body is said to be the gross body, the stula sarira. The next 3 sheaths, the pranamaya kosha, manamaya kosha, and vijnanamaya kosha, are said to be the sukshma sarira, the subtle body. And the anandamaya kosha, or chittam, the will, is said to be the karana sarira. This is the division of the 5 sheaths into 3 bodies. There, the subtle body is being used to refer to 3 of the 5 sheaths. But when it is said that the subtle body goes from one life to another, it doesn't mean, it's not using subtle body in that sense. That's why in in the end of the fourth paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says it's the mind alone that is called the subtle body. There he's using the term mind, not in the sense of Manamaya Kosha, but in the sense of ego. And he makes it particularly clear in verse 24 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, where when he describes about the Chit-Jada Granthi, the I that rises, that is neither the body nor is it Sat-Chit, because Sat-Chit doesn't rise, the body is not aware I. But in between one I rises as the extent of a body, that is ego. And then he said, this is Chit-Jada Granthi, that is the knot that binds the Chit and Jada. Of course, Chit is never bound, but from the perspective of ego, the Chit seems to be bound to the body. Chit-Jada Granthi, bandham, bondage. Because we're bound to, that this false identification I am a body binds us to all these material things. Bandham, jivan, the jiva, nupame. Nupame means subtle body. So the term subtle body, when he said the ego is the, and then he goes on, nupame, ahande, ego, Iksham-charam, this samsara, and mind. So all these refer to that one I. So their subtle body is not referring to 3 of the 5 sheaths, but to the I that identifies all the 5 sheaths as itself. So when it is said that it's the subtle body that transmigrates from one body to another, what that means is ego migrates, and what it takes with it are its vasanas. But the vasanas are the seeds for everything. So all the other sheaths are contained in the vasanas, so to speak. That is all the other 4 sheaths are in seed form in the that is the seed form of the other 4 sheaths are among the vasanas. So vasanas are so the vasanas are always very close to ego. Again, it's a metaphorical way of saying it, because vasanas is that is the very nature of ego, is to have vasanas. So that's why Bhagavan said the vasanas reside along with ego. So we need to understand all these things in the context. Bhagavan isn't literally saying that this 0.2 digits to the right is the heart in the ultimate sense. The ultimate heart is what we actually are, the Atma-swarupa. That's got nothing to do with the right-hand side of the chest. It's only as far as the ego is concerned that this body seems to be I, and that this point seems to be the center. So the term heart is used in different sense in different contexts. We use the term heart often to refer to the will is often referred to as the heart. The emotions are often referred to as the heart. We describe someone as heartless if they've got no kindness. So the word heart is used in many different senses, because heart simply means the center. And relative to the world, this body seems to be the center. We experience everything from the perspective of his body. We see the whole world. But what is in the center of the body is ego. That is, ego is what perceives the whole world. So this body seems to be center only because ego is seeing through this body, it's seeing the world. So ego is in a sense the heart, but it's not the ultimate heart. It's an intermediate heart. The ultimate ego is the false awareness, I am Sanjay. What is the heart of that heart? That is the pure awareness I am. So as far as the body is concerned, there's no connection, that the only connection between Sat-Chit, which is the ultimate heart, and this body is ego. Its ego is the link between the two. Because it's only in the view of ego that the body and world seem to exist. So the ego is the heart of everything. And the heart of ego is Satchit.
Right.
Is that a clear answer?
No, sir, it's a clear answer. So in this sense, heart can be interpreted in two ways. One way is, as you said, on this two digits to the right of the center of the chest, and the other sense could be the ultimate heart also, because the ego resides in the ultimate heart. That is not the...
Yes. But when this verse is obviously referring to the body. So
Okay.
as far as the body is concerned, ego is centered here. But what is the
Okay.
heart of the ego is the pure awareness I am.
Mhm. Thank you, sir.
And that though the pure awareness I am, Satchit, is the center of everything, it's also that in which everything is contained.
Mhm.
And when they say,
I believe Bhagavan once said in English, center everywhere, circumference nowhere.
Yes, I
That
remember.
is, it contains everything within it, but it is the center of everything.
So in this verse, heart means a particular place in the body.
It's referring to the body, yes.
It's referring to the body.
Because it's talking about if the vasanas were in the head, they'd be destroyed by cutting off the head.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Even if it was so easy to destroy the vasanas, just cut off the head and the vasanas were destroyed, how many of us would line up to have our head chopped off? We wouldn't, because we still have so much attachment to this body. That shows how strong our vasanas are.
yeah,
Thank you,
I
sir.
think that verse has to be read with the Swami Sadhu Om's commentary, which I posted on the chat box. Basically what Michael just said, that Kavikanta Ganapati Shastri was once arguing with Bhagavan, saying that vasanas dwell in the sahasrara, the brain. And refuting this, Bhagavan gave this teaching in verse 249. And then he talks about in a battlefield, when a soldier's head is cut off, his body may continue showing signs of life for some time. And if vasanas were to dwell in the brain, they would be destroyed and moksha would be attained, and a person was beheaded. But since that's not the case, and the life center, which is the dwelling place of jiva and his vasanas, is referred to in this verse as a heart, not the brain. And that also is a it's a concession to the questioner. The true heart is the ullam, the pure awareness, right, as you explained.
Thank you, sir.
Pardon me?
Thank you, sir, I said.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's go to the next question, which is from Sarah. Sarah, go ahead.
Thank you.
You there? Yeah.
Michael, my question is about practice. I want to know if practice can take root if you're coming from a place of deep sadness or despondency and just a general skepticism that you can ever attain that degree of peace or contentment that you're looking for. Can it come from that place? And can it also take hold if there is a strong desire that at least there should be some happiness and contentment from within?
Desire for happiness is the key motivating factor. We are all seeking happiness, but we will seek that happiness within ourselves only when we have a certain degree of clarity. So long as our mind is clouded by a thick fog of vasanas, it will seem to us that we can get happiness from external things. So we'll be seeking money and sensual pleasures and name and fame and all sorts of things. We think they'll be the source of happiness, but of course they won't be. We'll be, wherever we seek happiness, we'll be disappointed until we seek happiness within ourselves. When by Bhagavan's grace we have a sufficient degree of clarity to understand we're never going to achieve the happiness we're seeking from external things. Even if we get what we want, it'll give us momentary pleasure, momentary satisfaction. But again, that dissatisfaction will set in because nothing short of infinite happiness will satisfy us. So all living beings are seeking happiness. That's just the nature of sentient beings. All sentient beings are seeking happiness without misery. As Bhagavan says in the very first clause of the first sentence of Nana. But most of us, because our minds are so clouded by Vishaya Vasanas, we are still seeking happiness outside, still hoping against hope that we'll get happiness from this or from that, which of course we won't. But when by Bhagavan's grace, we come to understand that we're not going to get happiness from external things. And this isn't a sudden revelation. It slowly becomes clearer and clearer to us. That is what motivates us to practice self-attentiveness. And the more we practice self-attentiveness, the clearer that will become to us. Regarding the other part of your question, if your difficult circumstances in life or despondency or all these things, they all have the potential to push us onto this path, but they will push us onto this path only if we have that clarity to understand that all these miseries that we are facing ultimately are caused by our attachment to external things. And to free ourselves from that attachment, we need to go back within.
So one of the things that I struggle with is that it's becoming a vicious cycle, right? I need to go within to fight the vasanas, but the vasanas are getting in the way of going within.
Yes, yes.
Is there merit in taking external actions to rid ourselves of the vasanas? Even if, we do it kicking and screaming and are upset about giving up things to fend off those vasanas.
That is, we can to some extent weaken the vasanas by other means, by means other than self-investigation. Bhagavan in Upadesha Undya, in verse 3, he says, Nishkarmiya karma done for God will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. When Nishkarmiya karma means action done without desire for the fruit. And whatever action we do will be motivated by something. So if it's not to be motivated by fruit, it has to be motivated by something else. So it can be only if it is motivated by love of God will we be able to do the Nishkarmiya karma. And when he says it will purify the mind, we need to understand the impurities in the mind of the vasanas. In the very previous verse, he said, what causes us to fall in the great ocean of action is the seeds. What he implies by seeds is vasanas. In the Malayalam version of that verse 2, he says, vasanakara vittai. That is the seeds in the form of vasanas. So the vasanas are what causes us to get caught, to drown deeper and deeper in this ocean of action. So they are the impurities in the mind. So when he says nishkarmiya karma done for the love of God will purify the mind, it means it will weaken the vasanas. And then he goes on to describe the different types of actions we can do, nishkarmiya actions we can do. There are 3 instruments of action. That is body, speech, and mind. So he says, puja, japa, and dhyana, actions of body, speech, and mind. And in this order, each one is superior to the previous one. So the better than puja is japa. Better than japa is dhyana. When he says it's superior, he means it's more effective in purifying the mind. The reason for this is you can be doing puja mechanically, but your mind can be wandering elsewhere. You can be wondering about how you're going to pay the bills and everything, but you're going through all the actions of the puja. That's if you take puja to mean ritualistic action, but your mind is on something else. Whereas if you're doing japa, you're more easily able to detect when the mind, you're repeating the name of your beloved God, your Ishtadeva, and with the aim to keep your mind fixed on your Ishtadeva. But you're repeating the name and your mind goes wandering somewhere else. You'll notice it more easily if you're doing japa than if you're doing puja. Whereas if you're doing meditation, you will immediately find out if your mind is going elsewhere. So the body's actions of the body are relatively gross. Actions of speech are subtler. Actions of the mind are subtler. So in this order, each is more purifying than the other. And then he gives a very broad definition. In verse 5, he gives a very broad definition of puja. He says, Ennuru yavam ireyuru amena, enni varipadal undipara. Worshipping, considering all the 8 forms to be forms of God, Isan Nalpusane Undipara. That is good worship of God. The 8 forms means the 5 elements, the sun, the moon, and jivas. So basically everything is included in that. So all forms are forms of God. So if you treat everything as a form of God and behave, treat it accordingly, that is good worship of God. So if you see a poor person and who's maybe a hungry person without food, and you give them food, if you give them food with the attitude that it is God himself who has appeared in the form of that poor person, so you don't give it as if I'm a superior person, he's an inferior person, so I give him something. No, you give it with God has come to me in this form, and this has given me this opportunity to worship him. So you give that food to that poor person with all love and respect and treat him with all honor. That is good worship of God. So it's a very broad definition. If you consider that nowadays we know about the harm we are doing to the natural environment by all our excessive consumerism and our use of fossil fuels and everything. We are causing global warming. We're causing so much trouble, not only to human beings, but to other species also. So if we try to treat the natural world with respect, we try not to overconsume, we try to live a eco-friendly lifestyle, try to have a small carbon footprint, all that. If we're doing that with the attitude of the whole world is God and we should treat it accordingly with love and respect, that is also good worship of God. So Bhagavan gives a broad definition of the puja, not limiting it just to the ritualistic puja. Of course, it includes the ritualistic puja, but any action you do, any action by body you do with the attitude that everything is God, is good worship of God. And then he goes on to talk about japa. Rather than hymns of praise, japa is better. Rather than japa done aloud, japa done softly within the mouth is better. Rather than japa done softly within the mouth, manisika japa, mental japa is good. That is a form of meditation. So when he says better than this is this, he means it's more effective in purifying the mind. So the best form of meditation is to do it mentally. You don't have to sing the name of God aloud. If you do it, rather than singing it aloud, if you do it mentally within your mind, that is more effective in purifying the mind. And then he talks about meditation in verse 7. Rather than interrupted meditation, uninterrupted meditation, like the flow of a stream or the pouring of ghee, that is good. Why he said that? Because if we're meditating on God and meditation is often interrupted by other thoughts, that means we're more concerned about other things than we are about God. So the degree of our love for God will determine how uninterrupted our meditation is. So all these none of these are self-investigation. None of these are Atma-vichara. These are all actions that we do with love for God and not expecting anything in return, not expecting that if I worship God, then he will bestow on me all health and wealth and take care of my family. No, we're not doing it for anything. We don't expect to gain anything from God. We're doing it simply for the love of God. That will purify the mind. That means that will reduce our vasanas to a considerable extent. But better than all of these, within all of these, we're taking God to be something other than ourselves. So rather than taking God to be something other than ourselves, in verse 8 he says, rather than anya-bhava means meditating on God as something other than ourselves, or anything, even puja, you're doing it with the attitude that God is something other than yourself. All these forms are forms of God. So rather than that, ananya-bhava. Ananya-bhava means meditation on what is not other. Not other than what? It implies not other than oneself. So meditating on God as not other than oneself with the understanding that he is I. That's what he says. Avanahamahum ananya-bhavam. That literally means ananya-bhava, we can say otherless meditation in which he is I. What that implies is, with the understanding that God is what is shining in us as I, we should meditate on nothing other than I. If we do so, that is anatinam uttamam, that is best of all. In the context, best of all means that's the most purifying of all, we can't even say actions, that's the most purifying form of sadhana. More than all these other puja, japa, and dhyana, meditating on ourself alone, in other words, Atma-vichara, that is best among all. And then in the next verse, verse 9, he says, by the strength of that, bhava balatina means by the strength of meditation. That implies by the strength of that self-attentiveness, being in sat-bhava. Sat-bhava means the state of being. So being in the state of being, which transcends bhavana, is parabhakti tattva. That is the supreme devotion to God. When he says which transcends bhavana, their bhavana implies meditation in the form of mental activity. There is a fundamental difference between meditating on oneself or meditating on anything other than ourselves. If we meditate on anything other than ourselves, that is a mental activity, because our attention is going away from ourselves towards some other thing. If we meditate on ourselves alone, that is not a mental activity. That's a subsidence of mental activity. Because, as Bhagavan made clear, the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by attending to other things, but to subside by attending to itself. So if we attend to nothing other than ourselves, we will thereby subside. And by the strength of that meditation, when we subside and remain in our natural state of being, that is parabhakti tattva. So from these verses, we can clearly understand Atma-vichara is the most effective means to purify the mind. It's not the only means. So having feelings of love for Bhagavan in your heart, maybe repeating his name if you like to do so, but particularly now Bhagavan is physically no longer present, but he's still present in the form of his teachings. That is, Bhagavan, in most sampradayas, most traditions, there's a lineage of gurus. Bhagavan never started the lineage of gurus. He never appointed any successor. Why? because he's the eternal Guru. But what he has left us is his teachings. So his teachings is, that is, he himself is in the form of his teachings. That is, why he appeared in human form was to give us these teachings. So keeping our mind dwelling on his teachings, that is also a very good sadhana. That is what is called Sravana and Manana. Sravana means paying close attention to the words of Guru. Manana means thinking about them, dwelling, keeping the mind dwelling on them. Because the more we think about his teachings, the more they themselves will reveal their meaning, not only their meaning, their implication. So all these are means by which we can purify the mind. If we like to do puja or japa or dhyana, that's also good. Better than all of these is keeping our mind dwelling on his teachings. Better than all is putting his teachings into practice. The benefit of keeping our mind dwelling on his teachings, he will be constantly encouraged to try to attend to ourselves. We may feel that we are failing time and time again. The important thing is trying. So long as we're trying, we're making progress.
Thank you, Michael. So there was a question, how do we know we are on the right path in your practicing?
Well, if the question means whether we are practicing Atma-vichara correctly, we can know that only by understanding Bhagavan's teaching. The more clearly we understand Bhagavan's teachings, the more clearly we will understand what is the practice. So many people who have difficulty understanding what is the practice, what I say to them, first we need to understand Bhagavan's teachings. If we understand Bhagavan's teachings, for example, Bhagavan, what is the practice of Atma-vichara can be said in a simple phrase: self-attentiveness. That is what is clearly implied by Bhagavan in the 16th paragraph of Nana, when he says, Sada kalamam manate atma-vil veitiriptikutan atma-vichara mendrupaya. The name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. So keeping the mind on oneself means being self-attentive. So self-investigation is being self-attentive. When we say that to people, many people don't grasp what it means, because they say, what is this self that we have to attend to? I can't find this I. All these sort of things, objections are because of a lack of clear understanding of Bhagavan's teachings. So what is required first is Sravana. Sravana doesn't just mean superficially reading the books. Sravana means paying very close attention, attentively listening or attentively reading Bhagavan's teachings. So if we attend to them closely, we will, when we read them, we try to understand what they're about. That trying to understand what they're about, thinking about it, in order to understand, that's called manana. If we haven't done sufficient Sravana manana, we won't even understand how to practice the nididhyasana. So if we have doubt about whether we're practicing Atma-vichara correctly, the very fact that we have a doubt means there's a lack of clarity of understanding. So we need to do more Sravana, more manana. That doesn't mean we leave trying to be self-attentive till the end. No, that is, if we're doing Sravana properly, though we talk of Sravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, there's not a hard and fast boundary between each one. If we're doing the Sravana properly, we'll be thinking about what it means. So the Manana will naturally accompany the Sravana. And when we're doing the Manana, that will naturally, when Bhagavan talks about self-attentiveness, what is this self-attentiveness? Well, automatically the Manana will lead to Nididhyasana. So if we do Sravana correctly, that'll lead to the correct Manana, that'll lead to the correct Nididhyasana. So we need to we need to keep our mind dwelling on his teachings, reading his teachings, thinking about them. And just by keeping our mind dwelling on them, they themselves will reveal the real input. That is, the Bhagavan's words are not ordinary words. They come from their ultimate source. They come from that prajnanam, which is Brahman, from that supreme, that ultimate pure awareness that is Brahman itself. So that is the source from which Bhagavan's words are coming. So they come with tremendous power. So by keeping our mind dwelling on his words, that itself will give clarity to us. And the more clarity we have, the more it'll be clear to us what is the practice of self-attentiveness. So if we have doubt about whether we're practicing it correctly, that's an indication that we haven't yet understood sufficiently clearly. We may have understood to some extent, but our understanding is not well rooted in our mind. So we need to pay very close attention to Bhagavan's teachings. And when I say close attention to Bhagavan's teaching, that's not each and everything that's been recorded of Bhagavan's questions, answers to questions, because people ask questions from many different perspectives. So Bhagavan gave answers that were according to it. Just like that verse of Guru Vachaka Kovai that Sanjay asked about, that was given in a particular context, given to people of a certain level of mentality. So we need to bear in mind that not everything that Bhagavan said is his pure teachings, because he as Bhagavan himself said, teaching has to be according to the taught. So, but if we want to find his teachings in their purest form, we can find them in his original writings. And the next best source is Guru Vachaka Kovai. Though Guru Vachaka Kovai does contain teachings that, like this verse that Sanjay referred to, they're not the very purest teachings of Bhagavan, but they are answers that Bhagavan gave in a particular context. But if we think deeply about those verses, we will understand them in context. That is, we'll understand the very fact that Bhagavan is talking about the head and the heart itself shows it's at a more superficial level, because it's talking about the body. The body is not what we are. So the fundamental teaching of Bhagavan is Deham Naham. I am not this body. Koham. Who am I? Soham. I am he. So if we understand the fundamentals of Bhagavan's teaching, we'll be able to understand different things he said in different contexts. We'll be able to understand them in context. We'll be able to understand this isn't the purest teaching of Bhagavan, but he said it he will have said it in some context. So when we keep our mind dwelling more and more in his teachings, all that the meaning and implication of his words will become clearer and clearer to us. And as that becomes clearer, it will become clearer what is the practice that we have to do. If, for example, if we haven't clearly understood that we are not this body or mind or anything, if we're told to attend to ourselves, I mean, if we take this body to be I, if we're told to attend to ourselves, we can sit in front of a mirror and look at this as a reflection of this body. But that's not. This body is not I. This mind is not I. I is just the mere awareness. That alone is I. The very first answer that Bhagavan gave to Shiva Prakasham Pillai, when Shiva Prakasham Pillai asked, Swami, who am I? Bhagavan answered, Arive Nan, awareness alone is I. And then Shiva Prakasham Pillai asked, what is the nature of that awareness? And Bhagavan said, Arivin Sarupam Satchidanandam. The nature of awareness, or what awareness actually is Satchidananda. So he's talking there not just about awareness of this or that, he's talking about the fundamental awareness, the pure awareness. So if we understand the significance of such words, then we will understand what we have to attend to is not this mind or body or anything else. It's just that mere awareness of our being, I am.
Thank you, Michael. So with that, so Ram, do you have a question? Because I'm trying to wrap up.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay, last question, go ahead.
Yes, Michael, two things. One, is ego same as the mind? Is ego equal to the mind, or is it more than the mind?
It depends. That is, the term mind is used in different sense in different contexts. If we take mind in its broadest sense, as Bhagavan said in verse 18 of Upadesha Undya, Enangale Manam, thoughts alone of a mind. So that's a very broad definition of mind. But of all thought, what he then goes on to say, of all thoughts, the root is the thought called I. Therefore, the mind is I. So what we need to understand from this is, if we take mind in its broadest sense of all thoughts, there are two elements in the mind. The ego, the thought called I, is the knowing element. All the others are known elements. That is, all other thoughts are objects. Ego is the subject. So since no object can exist without a subject, no other thoughts can exist without ego. Ego is the root of the mind. It's also the essence of the mind. So the term mind, in some contexts, it refers to other thoughts. In some context, it refers to the knower of all other thoughts, which is ego. So ego is the root and essence of the mind. So when Bhagavan uses the word mind, we need to understand from the context whether he's referring to the mind as the knower or the mind as the known. The mind as the knower is ego. The mind as the known is all the other thoughts.
Got you. The second related question is more of a statement based on what you said. When the mind goes outside, it multiplies. When it goes inside, it subsides. Is that correct?
That's correct. But what goes outside is ego and its attention. That is, ego going outside means it's paying attention outside. It's facing outside. That same ego that is now facing outside, attending to so many objects or phenomena, needs to turn back to face itself.
Yep. Okay. And this subject you talked about, is that the small I?
Yes, the ego is the subject. The subject means the knower. That is, there's not a small I and a big I. There's only one I. Ego is that one I mixed and conflated with adjuncts. That is what you mean by small I. That is, so it's only as ego that we know all these phenomena. As the pure I, the pure awareness that we actually are, we know nothing other than ourselves. That is, pure awareness means awareness that is devoid of objects of awareness, devoid of content or whatever we can call it. So pure awareness means the awareness that knows itself alone.
So the knower you mentioned, which is that the awareness?
It's awareness in the form of ego that is the knower. But pure awareness knows nothing other than itself.